Hi, Uma. Thanks for joining me for Lead Time Chats.
Hi, Jean. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Um, so the topic today is that coincidentally, we both started VP of engineering roles in the middle of the pandemic. And so we're going to talk about that. And so let's just dive in. We can just go back and forth. Like, what was one of the challenges for you of onboarding remotely and making that transition? I mean, both remotely and in the middle of a pandemic.
I think I would describe it as challenging even before. Like, I think the challenge starts even before joining, because I actually did like my entire interview in like remotely, and I realized how much in the interview process we typically kind of rely on body language to develop a sense of comfort and trust with
Mhm.
people, and that just was not available. So you're just in that case, I think I just relied on a lot more conversations that I maybe would have in the interview process. And then onboarding remotely was also challenging. It was funny because I had been on the other side of it
Mm.
before I did this. I did have empathy for people who were doing it, but then and so kind of finding myself on the kind of the remote experience side was interesting. The challenging things were kind of an extension of the same thing, which is the ability to kind of build rapport and build trust, and how much you kind of lean into body language early
Mhm.
on in the process. I think the interesting thing was also on the first day, or like the few days leading up to my first day at work, is how much, at least for me, I unconsciously rely on the rituals of kind of
Mm.
going into a new picking my outfit for the first day and going into a new office, and then picking up my new laptop. And because this was back in December, so um, shipping and stuff was still not going that well. So my laptop was a little delayed. So I was actually just using my personal
Mm.
laptop the first few days. And so I was like, oh, so I just wake up and join a Zoom at 9 a.m. Like, this feels like a weird way to start a new job. And it was just really the kind of the lack of just rituals and the first day
Mhm.
nervousness, both good
Yeah.
and bad, because I was like, okay, I guess I don't have to worry about anything because I'm just going to do what I
It's
normally
gonna
do.
be at home. Yeah. You don't get that experience of like coming into your desk, seeing like a little welcome package, all that.
Yeah, I did get those. My team is really great, so they kind of sent me like a little welcome package, but it had actually come the week before,
Oh,
so I
nice.
already had it. But it was a slightly different experience. I had swag and stuff like that before.
Yeah. Yeah, Range shipped me some as well. And it was funny because it was all these like stickers and cups, these like insulated cups. And then my
Yes.
kids were like, they thought that my new job was working for a company that made cups. And so they I was like, yeah, I guess that makes sense, right? Like you don't have any visibility into what I do except that they've shipped me cups and the cups say range on them. So it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
hilarious. Yeah, one
Yeah.
of I think the challenges for me were mostly logistical. Like at that time, my kids were here half the time, and so just figuring out like how much can I actually work, and I was winding down my old business, and so just the logistics of like, yeah, I really want to dive in, but I'm just going to work 1 day a week, which is what I did for maybe like 2 months. And that's kind of a weird way to start as well. I think it worked really well, but it was hard to be like, I really want to dive in, but I know I need to like hold back and like get other stuff done so that I can dive in when it's time. So
Yeah.
just the logistics of like, yeah, of just the pandemic induced like kids. I mean, my kids haven't been in school in a year, so
Same.
that challenge, and like and communicating like, oh, they're still going to be here a day a week, and everything was changing. Either they're going back to school, and we were hiring a babysitter, and so I still had about half a day a week where I had to provide childcare my own. So I think that was the main challenge for me. Everything else, I
Yeah.
think range was already very remote first and remote friendly. So, and it also helped that I knew a lot of the team as well.
Yeah, I think I had less of the logistics challenges because in
Hmm.
terms of my hours and the kind of job, I already had that childcare set up like
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
through the like I mean through the summer. Like as soon as we knew that school wasn't uh, going to be like in the near future, I just like I had already gone through the whole angst of do we do pods? Do I just like get a full time sitter? What do we do? What's safe? What's not?
You already had
But
done that.
I had done all of that over the summer, so that turned
Yeah,
out
that
to be
makes
good.
sense. I had basically dialed down my work to half time. So when the kids were here, I was just with them. And then I tried to do all my work the other half of the week. So I had to, scramble to figure that out when I started at Range. Um, Another similarity is for both of us, it's our first time in this role, a VP of engineering. You were an engineering manager at Stripe. I was an engineering manager at Medium, and then did some leadership development. What's been most different from our previous roles, and what's been most surprising?
Biggest surprise to me was when on my first day, like the whole team had joined the Zoom to welcome me, and
Mhm.
we all fit on one Zoom screen. That was like the biggest surprise
The
to
whole
me. And
company.
yeah, like the entire company fitting on one
Yeah.
Zoom was like very nice. And I think
Uh,
that's when like, I knew the number, but it's somehow like that's when it's like, oh wow, this is really nice because like my old team was
Mhm.
like 40. So, multiple Zoom screens at that point. So that was
I see.
interesting.
And then the
So
company is obviously
yes,
much
yes,
larger too.
yes. Yeah, like the company is like multiple thousands. So
Yeah.
like, when there's all hands, it's actually not, it's done in the Zoom presentation mode versus this mode.
Ah.
So that was like fascinating. And I think the interesting thing is like, kind of related to the size, but I think there's like this subtle nuance between, I've been talking about this with some other colleagues as well, where there's a subtle nuance between coming in as a senior leader, which I was in a previous role, but you kind of like essentially have a whole um, an apparatus supporting you because you are one
Hmm.
of many leaders, and now it's like I am like essentially reporting to the CEO. So it's a
Hmm.
very like different kind of like I am the only engineering manager and
Mm.
the VP. So it's like
So there's less
it's
like infrastructure to support you. Yeah, that's true. When I joined, I worked with one of the co-founders to put together to like iterate on the goals and feedback process. And like I didn't go through it, like it's like not for me, it's for like everyone else. And so like the structure to support people in our roles is a little bit sparse. So just being okay with that
yeah.
and asking for what you need, I think is really
Yes,
important.
yes, for
Yeah.
sure, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, what was most different at a very fundamental level was that before I had joined startups when they were like 5 engineers, and right when we were building the first product. So Medium, I helped build the first prototype, and then at Pulse I was working on their Android app. And so Range was already like 3.5 years in, and so not coming in and not having the context of like, where has the product been, like how did we end up here, and like what's going on with this code base. Like I didn't know React or Go, and just like trying to like cobble together that knowledge was a good exercise in like, okay, let me figure out what do I actually need to know, and what did I know before at previous companies but actually don't need to know here, and what do I actually need to know here, and how do I get that information, right?
Yeah, I think in some ways my experience was flipped because it's like, it's the first time I'm coming into where the total bounds of everything I can learn is somewhat like, like I can actually put my arms around it versus in all of
Yeah.
my previous roles, I was coming in like the smallest company I've ever been in was still like 300 employees and like 100
Hmm.
engineers and had been around for 6 or 7 years. So
Yeah.
this is the earliest I've ever come in. So it's exciting because it's like, oh wow, I get to see like, uh the early numbers in the issue tracker.
Oh yeah. I think that the other big difference for me is that like at Medium, I manage teams of like, 15 engineers, which is kind of pushing it in terms of like direct reports. And there's only 5 engineers at range, but I feel like the range of stuff that I'm doing is very different, right? Because it kind of the role kind of flexes into different areas. Like a month ago, I was like, you know what? I think it's really important for me to work on onboarding as like do some IC work on onboarding because it's really important to move forward. And that like totally made sense then. And then last week I was like, I don't think that makes sense anymore. I think it actually makes sense for me to do more like external outreach and like focus on these talks and recording these chats and like doing more like almost completely switching my role to like more outward facing or public VPE type role. And like it's surprising how quickly that can shift even within like a 2-week cycle. It can be like just constantly reassessing like what makes sense for the role.
Yeah. And also I think, yeah, I totally hear you on the what makes sense for the role. Like I'm in my case, I'm just like doing many different kinds of recruiting recently, recruiting for roles that I haven't done before. And then also just like, on the operations side, it's like getting familiar with like our payroll system, for instance. That's like always kind of fun or not so fun, depending on whether I
Yeah,
feel like dealing with the system that day
probably something you didn't have to deal with at Stripe. Yeah, I
or
think one of
ever.
the yeah yeah one of the first weeks I joined, Dan like forwarded some email to me about negotiating a contract with some like third party vendor. He's like, hey, can you do this? I'm like, well, I've never done it before, but like if we chat about it for 10 minutes, I'm sure I can figure it out. Like, oh, different role, like different things to do, which is, yeah, it keeps it interesting for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. And then of course, we're in a pandemic. I mean, as we said earlier, both our sets of kids have been home or not in school for a year. So any particular challenges that arise from that sort of situation?
I think I guess I've been like, very fortunate in many ways in that I have one child. She spends a lot of time with her dad, and we have like consistent childcare. Like we essentially have one person that we're stuck with. So I think that has actually been, I would say, I actually get the opportunity to see a lot of more of her in the day to day during the pandemic, right? Than I would. The challenges just tend to be like it just tends to be a little random
Yeah.
in what will happen on a particular day. So it's like sometimes there'll be like a meeting or something I'm doing, and then I kind of like leave to get a break, and then that break then turns into like dealing with the meltdown because she sees me and like and then we have the interaction. So it's less.
You gotta sneak around a little bit.
Yeah. It's so I think that's the versus. I was just thinking this week earlier that what I miss about the office was that when I would go get coffee, when I like left a meeting to go get coffee, I could actually predictably get coffee and come back and not have to like empty the dishwasher, deal with a tantrum, and do some 3 other things on my way back to my desk.
Yeah, that separation I think is something people, even people who like working remotely, are struggling with. Just like this is home and this is work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the challenge for me, I mean, it's mostly we have a pod set up with like 4 households, so 2 sets of divorced parents, which in terms of ratio works out well. You've got 4 households for 3 kids, which is a good ratio and a good number of physical spaces for them to rotate through. But it has been, as you said, like a bit random. Like there's going to be like the schedule changes around, or there's some days when my partner is working in here and the kids are here, and I'm like in the bedroom with like a temporary desk and lock the door, like hoping no one tries to find me, like trying to stay quiet, but also like participate in meetings. But overall, I've definitely also been very fortunate to have like that setup that's been stable throughout.
Yeah, I definitely I think my comfort has improved, but definitely in the beginning. I also moved houses right as I was moving jobs. So there was definitely this period where I actually lived in a much smaller place. There was this kind of discomfort with like taking meetings from like my bed, which I had like my old team, like because when the pandemic started, we all just like embraced it. It was fine. But then starting a new
Everyone's in
role,
bed.
yeah, but then starting a new role, and as the head of engineering, and you're taking meetings from the bed, it was like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then
I
like
think we're a
slowly
year
getting them
in.
used, yeah, and then
Yeah,
slowly
we're
getting
a
them
year
used
in.
to
It's
that.
just like, I mean, this is like the nicest thing I've worn in like months because I had a talk earlier. Like, my partner's like, "Oh, you look nice today." Like,
I figured I could like rep. Figured I could like render
nice,
the best hoodies ever.
nice. Oh, it looks very comfy.
It is the
Cool.
softest.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Uma. It's great to chat with you.
See, thank you for having me.